So this week I'm editing a video on my first ever DIY treadmill desk that I made. So keep on watching and I'll show you how I did it. So it was only last Friday that I realised it's been a year since I've basically spent most of the time sat down at a desk and have an office job, and that really isn't me. So I wanted to do something about it and I started looking at treadmill desks. I didn't realise it was a thing, and it turns out they're really expensive. You can pay about £1,000 to £2,000. So I decided to create one with a corner shelf that I could use for 2 screens, because this is how I edit and blog. So I'll leave a link below to this one that I've got, and it's by Sport. It's one of the cheaper ones. I also saw a lot on Amazon without handrails, but the cheap ones interfered with the Wi-Fi, and that was no good because I'm always on the internet. So what I recommend is going on Amazon, having a look at the measurements, and asking on there about the arm heights. It was very important that I got this right, where I could be comfortable with it. But you could always add a stand on here if it's a little bit too low. So the first thing that I did was tested with the scrap piece of wood. It was definitely too low, but this was just a dummy run. I also don't really know why they've promoted this with a free water bottle, because it doesn't even fit in the drink cup holders. So I didn't mind covering that up, but I did want to be able to see the control panel and access the stop and start. So after putting it in the place it's going to be, I decided to use a scrap piece of wood to get the height of where I wanted my laptop. I like my elbows just slightly underneath. That's how I'd check myself out at a normal desk. So I will leave a blog post below, but this one is tailored to my needs. Because there's no way of adjusting it other than putting some blocks underneath, you're going to have to make it tailor-made for you. And I decided to predominantly make this out of structural CLS timber because I had so much of it left over in my shed. And just to give you an idea, this is the plan that I designed. But if you wanted to make it smaller, obviously you could do. You don't necessarily need these shelves. You could just go with 2 simple side pieces either side, and that is it. That would work. So I made all of my cuts using my miter saw, and I knew I needed a desk area that would be big enough for my laptop and my monitor. Plus I always like extra shelves. Then I put the shelving system together, and I thought I'd test my gifted Einhell compact driver for the first time. I can now see why a lot of you said I'd benefit from one of these. Not necessarily this brand in particular. And this meant I didn't pre-drill any holes. However, occasionally I did notice it split the wood, but there's enough screws on here I felt okay. So if you've got the time, I'd still pre-drill. It was more because it was towards the end of a cut, and I'd make it square with a speed square. And then I added another centerpiece, and that was the start of one of the shelves. But because I didn't have enough timber to duplicate this one to create the shelf itself, I moved on to building one of the side sections. So I used a scrap piece of wood, plonked it on top just to gauge an idea of how deep I wanted my desk, and to make sure I didn't block access to the hand sensors on the handrails. And then after taking a measurement I was happy with, I built that side piece exactly the same as the other one. So back to the shelving side, I knew I only had a certain amount of space, and this meant cutting tiny pieces that were too dangerous to cut on a chop saw. And it was around this time that I'd realised that my Trend pocket hole jig created pockets for wood that was 38mm thick maximum, and this CLS was. So I was really pleased with that. So from then on, it was pocket hole city. This made things so much easier rather than having to carefully avoid hitting screws coming at a different angle. And I did this for 9 short pieces of wood. But before I went to the shop to go and get some CLS timber, I tried to make use of the daylight and attach these to the first shelf side. But I highly recommend doing this after, because I swapped some of them over later to get better access to screw them together. So this is my shelf system starting to take place. If it's quite chunky for you, you could always go for a smaller timber, but I do love how strong and sturdy this is. The other thing is I purposely didn't glue and screw it together because I knew I wanted to dismantle it just in case I moved it to another room, because I'm always moving my desk. And I'd love to be able to take this from house to house if we ever moved. So now I've got both of the side pieces all built. I then put my treadmill in place, gave a few inches for clearance so I could easily take it out if I wanted to, and then took that measurement and cut a few more battens to pocket hole and attach it into place. And I also attached 2 in the centre to continue that shelving. And another 2 at the bottom, although the shelf there isn't as deep. Okay, done. So now for the trickier part is making sure I accurately measure the top of my desk and then mark it on the plywood and cut it out, because I wanted it in one continuous piece. So the first thing I did was cut the plywood to the same width as my desk plus 3 centimetres, giving it 1.5 centimetres excess all the way around. Now where it returns, I didn't want a really sharp corner here. I did mess up slightly. I wanted to create a bigger curve than this with a cup, and I accidentally drilled a hole on the wrong side to start with my jigsaw. Luckily, because of the 1.5 centimetre clearance, I actually got away with it, and my router later still created a nice curve. So yeah, make sure you don't make that mistake. And I used whatever long straight pieces that I could to clamp and use it as a guide for my jigsaw, because I didn't want to use a circular saw for this and accidentally mess things up, and I just felt more in control doing this. So because I had the jigsaw out, I thought this was a perfect time to cut the hole for the control panel. That way I could access it in an emergency, close the laptop, press stop, start, or whatever. Also, this lifts up slightly if I want to, or I could push it down. Just bear that in mind. So I placed it in position. Tried my best to get it absolutely bang on central.
Oh, this is tricky.
Clamped it in place so it didn't move around. And then from underneath, I drew around the control panel with a pencil. So really I did play this partly by ear because I'm stood at a certain height, and I started off small, and if I couldn't see the start button, I cut it a little bit bigger so I could access it okay. But say if my husband's on here, he's slightly taller, he probably would have got away with it the previous size. Now something I probably really should buy is one of those sanding barrel attachments that you attach to your combi drill. I really should get one of those. But instead, off camera I used a rasp for this and sanded the whole piece and all of my cuts. I just find a straight edge gives a much better finish when you come to chamfer any edges with a router. And I also sanded the entire piece because I knew I'd be Danish oiling it, and I wanted it very smooth and lovely. So the next day, although I didn't get it on film, I repeated the same process as the top for the middle shelf, but I cut notches out for the battens in the way. And then I'd sand the piece again. And this is one of my most favourite times when dealing with plywood, is Danish oiling it, getting all of the grain to stand out. It just feels like the entire process has been so much worth it. And I gave the top and the middle shelf 2 coats. However, I didn't have enough to create a continuous piece for the bottom shelf, and again I didn't get that on film because it's just so easy. I thought I'd just paint that black with the rest of the framework. So last night I filled the screw heads with wood filler, but now I've got to sand the whole piece. I'm not looking forward to this, but I did get these pieces cheap. Where's my dust mask? As for paint, and with it being Christmas week, I made sure I went for one that I didn't have to sand or prime, and I found this Rust-Oleum's furniture paint in a satin finish. This is the first satin finish that I've found that you don't have to do any prep, and you don't have to seal it either, and I was really happy with this. I only gave it one coat, and it matched the sofa like it belonged. So yeah, I'm looking forward to using this on a lot of other projects, and I only used half a can, so I'm sure I can think of something to make for my new desk. And this is where it was just too dark really to film and see what I was doing, so I had to use my beanie hat with torch, and all I did was just fix the top and the middle shelf from the bottom with L brackets. It's as simple as that. So I really hope this video has been useful, and I know that I'm going to get loads of use out of this, hopefully forever. I've already tried editing bits of a video and I did fine. I've written to people, did perfectly okay. The only thing I'm not quite sure about is writing things while I'm here. That I felt slightly disorientated with. But if you do anything differently, please, as always, comment below. And hopefully as well, everyone has a great Christmas, and that I see you in 2020. Thanks for watching. Bye! Let's be a little bit more serious. You monkey.